Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my long-term 10-year anniversary pros and cons review of the Fender Blues Deluxe Reissue amplifier. This will hopefully answer everything that you need to know about this amp from a long-term owner's perspective. Now, this video is not sponsored. I purchased this all the way back in October of 2014, but before that, I actually bought one in July of 2010. I then sold it to get a smaller amplifier, missed it so much, I ended up moving other stuff on and buying another one the next month because it's such a great amp. And if you're looking for a high headroom, really wonderful clean channel gigging amplifier, this would still definitely be the way to go. Now, like all of my videos, you can hear plenty of samples, and I'll timestamp all the different samples in the description box if you just want to hear the sample tones. But I've been using this on the channel for many years, all the way back to 2010. So I've got plenty of samples on here. Every time I do a pedal review video, I'm using the Blues Deluxe on the most part because it's still an awesome pedal platform. Let's get into it. For those unfamiliar with the Blues Deluxe amplifier, let me give you a quick recap. It's a 40-watt single 12-inch speaker combo. It's covered in tweed. It's a 2-channel amplifier. We get a really nice clean channel and a somewhat usable drive channel. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. And unlike a lot of the black panel amplifiers from Fender, this is dedicated mids control, which I really like. It definitely helps kind of cut the mix in certain scenarios and with certain pedals, all that kind of thing. This is dedicated presence control, and it has one of the nicest built-in reverbs I've heard on any amp. These amps are loud enough to be used in any kind of live situation unmiked in a room. 40 watts is plenty loud, and if you pair this amplifier with the right speaker, you're going to get even better results, and we'll talk about that coming right up. This Blues Deluxe Reissue gives you two separate inputs. One is the standard, and one gives you a lower gain input, so if you want to use it with active pickups, you can do so. There's also an effects loop built into it. Now, this is a preamp in and out, but it's essentially the same thing. So if you want to use modulation or time-based effects through the effects loop of the amplifier, you can do so as well. Underneath the amplifier, there's also the option to hook this up to a second extension cab. So if you want to run two cabs at the same time, you can do so. We also get a foot switch included, which is somewhere. I'll find it and put some overlays on screen. This allows you to switch between the clean and dirty channel and also turn the reverb on and off. Just know, unlike a Fender Twin, Deluxe Reverb, or Princeton, for example, there's no built-in tremolo on this one. It's just reverb. That's the only effect you get. Let's start by talking about some of the benefits of this amplifier. And this comes from using it live in the studio over the course of hundreds of videos here on the YouTube channel. And this just comes from my own experience owning plenty of different amps and also testing a lot of different amps. I think the price to performance ratio on this is right up there with the best of the best when you're talking about 12-inch speaker amplifiers rated above 15 watts. Now, you could compare this directly up against a Hot Rod Deluxe, for example, which is a very similar amp, but I never really found myself using those drive channels a whole lot. Fender have kind of got it sorted a little bit better with the latest editions of the Hot Rod Deluxe, but back when I got this, the drive channels on the Deluxe amps sucked, which is why I ended up getting this. I just thought I'm going to use the clean channel and use it with pedals, and this is where it really shines. Now, the Blues Deluxe drive channel is like the lower gain option found on the Hot Rod Deluxe, so it's not great, but it's okay in a pinch. Let's have a listen. For those unfamiliar with live playing and all that kind of stuff, 40 watts is all you'll ever need. 40 watts is so loud, I've never once thought to myself using this amp, I need more volume. It's easily loud enough that I can keep the volume up at about 10 o'clock tops, like without even pushing it up to dead straight at 12 o'clock. And I've got way more volume than I'll ever need for any of the situations that I'm in. Now, I play a lot of jams, and I've done plenty of gigs with this amplifier in situations where the amp isn't mic'd. And for those situations, this amplifier is an absolute beast. If you're playing in a situation where you can't be as loud, this amplifier will be too loud for most situations. But you can still make it work if you use the volume control, which is one of the cool things about it. Another reason to get the Blues Deluxe over something like a Deluxe Reverb, especially if you're a live player, is how much headroom you have when you start stacking overdrive pedals into the front end of it. Now, if you like to use pedals, getting a high headroom amp like this with the 6L6 tubes is awesome, man. You get so much headroom, and the amp progressively gets louder as you click on overdrives. If I'm using a Deluxe Reverb, it kind of caps out with the volume at about midday, and then when I'm slamming the front end, it will get a little bit louder, but it will also get really heavily saturated. With this particular amplifier, I get a nice big round clean sound, and then I can incrementally stack pedals into it and not only boost the volume but still retain the full vibe of the amp. And this is one of the best things about higher headroom clean channel amplifiers. And again, if you go up to a 100 watt amplifier like a twin, you're going to have even more of that. But 40 watts is the sweet spot when it comes to size to performance, and it's plenty loud for any situation I've ever gigged with. Let's talk about the stock speaker and why I ended up changing it out. So one of the biggest downsides of these amplifiers is what was the stock speaker 10 years ago. It was too bright, it had too much bass, it didn't have enough mids, it was just a pretty terrible sound overall. I found it pretty unusable to my ear, but I knew just how great these amps could sound with other speakers, because my prior one, I changed out the same crappy stock speaker out to a Lowrance, which is an Australian-made greenback clone. It was a 75 watt version of the greenback, basically. And it gave me a much, much better sound. I was like, man, this transformed the amp. Why don't Fender load something like this in from the factory? Anyway, so I thought I'd take a chance on a different speaker in this one. I ended up going for the Eminence Swamp Thing, which kind of keeps the American sound of the amp intact. It does attenuate the top end just a hair, but it still gives you lots of beautiful tops, and you get plenty of low end. It just has that classic Fender sound. Now, does this change the vibe of the amp a little bit? Yes, but it made it far more usable, especially at louder volumes. There's very little speaker distortion in this 150 watt RMS speaker. So you can turn it up further without the speaker actually distorting, which gives you a cleaner sound. And this is part of the whole high headroom clean tone that I really love about this amp, because if I stack pedals into it or really push it hard, I'm not going to get a whole lot of speaker distortion, which I really like. Now, everyone likes different stuff, but for me, this speaker represents arguably the best match for this amp that I've used personally, alongside the Red, White, and Blues, which is a great, really well-balanced speaker for Fender amps, and especially the Blues Deluxe. And of course, I've tried it with the Texas Heat, which is a killer speaker. That Texas Heat will roll out a little bit of top end, but it gives you a much fatter mid-tone. So depending on your style, you might be a slide player looking for a fatter mid sound without that extra tops, because slide players generally have a lot of tops. Texas Heat will be the way to go in that situation, but they all sound really nice in this one. I'm a big fan of Eminence speakers. I'm not sponsored by them. I just think they're really good when it comes to matching them into an amp that's got plenty of volume like this. It's a really great pairing. I've really only had two problems with this amplifier since getting it, and the first one happened within the first week of owning the second amp of these. So basically, Fender were using these dog bone handles that were really sort of spongy and soft, and it broke, I think, the second time I picked it up, but a new one got sent out under warranty, and I had no problems with it ever since. And it's the same handle that's still on there right now. Secondly, and just the other day, I started noticing a really loud hum on the amplifier, and I couldn't work out what it was just by like looking at it. Visually, everything looked fine. I pulled the back of the amplifier off. Nothing looked out of sorts. And then I realized it's the RCA cable on the reverb tank. Now, given that this amplifier has been in the car 100 or more times, I'm really shocked this didn't happen earlier. I've also just loaded up cables and all kinds of crap in the back of this amplifier, and the RCA cable itself had broken. So as you can see from this on screen, you can see that there's a little piece of plastic missing from around the ring. Now, all that this piece of plastic actually does is try to keep the RCA cable from coming off. It's just like there to keep the two sections of it together. I just basically pushed it back together, put it back in, and I was done. I also just sprayed it with contact spray just in case, but no problems there whatsoever, and it's fixed. Now, if that becomes a problem again, I'll probably have the RCA connector replaced at some point in time, but it's been super reliable, and the fact that I've taken it out so many times and used it live, and I've used it for hundreds and hundreds of videos here in the studio, it's been fantastic. So Fender knew how to make an amp back in the day. There's only really other two considerations when it comes to owning a Fender Blues Deluxe amp. You can get an okay clean signal at low volumes by using the volume control down low, but it's definitely not going to sound as good as it would with it up past 2. So keep that in mind. Tube amps don't really shine at low volumes, but if you're in a pinch playing at home, you can make this work. It's way too loud for an apartment, so don't even think about it unless you've got some sort of proper power attenuation sorted out, whether that's a 2-note capped or X or an aux box or anything else like that, for example. Secondly, this amplifier is kind of heavy, but I love the fact that it's not physically big, which means it's easy to get in and out of your car. It's easy to put on a trolley and wheel it around, and you're not sacrificing tone. I think if you're going for something like a Blues Junior over this, it's a smaller cabinet, it's a smaller amplifier, it's rated at 15 watts, you're not going to get the same kind of clean headroom. Great little amps, but definitely a very different experience playing wise and sound wise over a Blues Deluxe, which gives you just that big high headroom sound, which I think is unmatched when you're talking about combos at this particular size. The closest thing I've got in my collection is the Marshall DSL 40CR, which is a much more versatile amp overall. Now, if you missed my long-term review of that, I'll link it up in the cards and you can watch it after this video. But I'm a huge fan of the Fender Blues Deluxe. It's definitely one of my favorite amps I've ever purchased. So much so that as soon as I sold it, I ended up buying another one the next month because I missed it that much. This thing's an absolute workhorse. I've got friends who own these as well, and they all swear by them in the context of a live mix. You know why? Because you never have the issue of not having enough volume. They really do sound great. So thanks again for watching. My name's Shane. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.